Hi, I'm Anita Biddappa. I am the Austin partner for BVA. It's a deep tech consulting company and also a VC based out of the Bay Area. I'm the operating partner in Austin. My background is cognitive systems and semiconductors. This is my history from working with IBM and Intel, and prior to that in Lattice Semiconductor. I'm here with 4 panelists who I'd like to have each of you introduce yourself quickly, and then we'll kind of shoot some questions at you. So let's start with...
Sure. My name is Prakash Mohandas. I'm the CEO and founder of InsurePro. It's a business insurance platform that's supposed to be the most transparent and configurable in the world. I've been in Austin for about 18 years. My background is in building platforms and APIs and taking them to market. And I've been building products and digital platforms for companies like Dell, Charles Schwab, AMD, just to name a few.
Super. My name is Denver Lobo, and I am the founder and CEO of PayUp. We are an early payments platform that allows vendors in the real estate industry to get paid earlier on their invoices. And my background prior to starting PayUp was in investment banking. I was working on raising money for companies in Latin America that did different forms of financing, everything from invoice factoring all the way to microloans, and did that at Credit Suisse and Morgan Stanley as well.
Fantastic. Hi everybody, my name is Mohammad Rahman. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of the International Accelerator. So as my CEO described, we are an accelerator, boutique accelerator here in Austin. We work with foreign founders and we help them scale and raise in Austin. It's a 12-month program that involves free housing, food, transportation, and office spaces, and most importantly, we mentor and give hand-in-hand support to our founders. My background for the past 20 years, I've worked mostly in telecoms, later in FinTech. I've worked with startups all the way up to helping very large organizations scale or develop new businesses. I just moved 3 months ago to Austin from Washington, D.C. And I'm loving it so far. This is the place to be.
Thanks. So my name is Shahini. I'm CEO and founder of Inorsa. We are an engineering hub for mission critical infrastructure, so telecom, EV charging, solar. We basically automate data collection, due diligence on the assets, and automate construction drawings, structure analysis, those stuff. What you need basically to build structures. I was an engineering manager for 12 years before this in oil and gas and telecom, and then I'm glad to be here.
Great. Yeah, so one of the questions that I wanted to kind of pose to you guys is, some of it was kind of addressed earlier. Winter has truly come from a, both in the weather and from a market perspective. It seems like it's cooling off. Seems like there is, words of inflation, depression, all kinds of conversations that are happening, right? From your perspective as founders, in some cases marketing, I'd like to hear your view on what you think has changed or will change, and how long will this last in your perspective?
I'd love to make a point there where, I've spoken to a couple of VCs as we are fundraising now as well, and the point was made earlier that there's 2 segments of the market, like the earlier stage and then the pre-IPO and post-IPO stage. And I think the latter is significantly getting affected versus the former. There are just as many deals. VCs have raised the most amount of capital in the last 2 years than ever before, and that money is ready to get deployed to startups like this, giving people good ideas. That money, though, is definitely making sure that when they do invest, they're investing on traction, they're investing on actual product market fit, and not an idea as you saw a lot happening in 2021. And for specific startups, I'd say my business, for example, because we're in the lending business, our options available for vendors actually get worse off in the next 12 to 18 months. And so options like ours that we can innovate for people to put food on the table for their family is very exciting for them.
That's great.
Yeah, so I think the paranoid survive. Like, I'm a huge Andy Grove fan, and I do think a lot of startups are going to go out of business. Fundraising is going to get difficult, but not necessarily in how much capital gets spent. It used to be that you have to have traction. I think you have to have traction and revenue. You can't just have one. And in our case, we build what's necessary for the customer. Like, they cannot build structures without it. And we try to we're an automation platform, so we automate most of the workflow. So I think focusing on what's absolutely necessary for the customer and revenue plus traction, that's what gets the longest survival. And I think this is going to take at least 2 years. So.
Great. Prakash?
I mean, well, I think in my industry, in ShoreTech specifically, there's been a trend of the last 3 years where I think there's a lot of money being raised, but I think irresponsibly being spent. So I think this is a good trend, honestly, in some sense that you have lesser, availability, more scrutiny of what the startup is doing. So only the true, quality ones come through, which is a good thing for the industry because then people won't look at InsurTech and go, I don't know about that space and it's kind of already ruined and kind of things like that. So I think it's a good trend actually that is constraining people, constraining startups to make sure only the really good ones actually come through.
Be more responsible, yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I really agree with Prakash, what he said over there in terms of responsible spending. So the latest PitchBook stats show us that early stage spending investments are going up versus the late stage. And it makes a lot of sense because, again, investors are looking out for novel solutions. And in terms of when we talk about market going down, at the same time, I think just a couple of days ago it was announced that a local startup, 3D printing startup, is announced that they're going to build 100 houses in Austin, in Georgetown, just north of Austin. So this indicates again that where something might be going down, something else is coming up. And it's really about looking for those asymmetries in the market. Anytime you face kind of these downfalls, there's bound to be some sort of opportunity coming up someplace. And I think it's really up to technology and the latest startups to figure out how to distribute that opportunity across to more users.
Absolutely. In every challenge, you have to find opportunity, right? My next question is really on PropTech, focusing on PropTech and looking at how much innovation is happening on this front as a market segment. Digitization, in my opinion, has been slow in this sector. And I really want to understand from your perspective, and also the audience here would, would open it up later for them. But do you, when you guys came up with your ideas in this sector, what, did you have a lot of ideas for this specific sector, or did you focus on one of them? And why PropTech? One of those questions is definitely high on my mind. So would like to see what you have to say on it.
Well, I mean, we started with the premise of PropTech, but at this point our customer set is only partially PropTech in some sense, which we've kind of diversified into small, medium business in general. But I think we found when we started with the experiment that both InsurTech and PropTech are still kind of dinosaurs compared to a bunch of other spaces that are out there. We're talking about the quantum charging. Nope, not even close. But yeah, you'll find that very simple things that you think are very obvious in other spaces become innovations in some of these spaces because they're just slightly behind, right? So, but the key there is to make sure that you're able to use that to leapfrog a little bit, and really apply it to the right kind of space. Like John was saying, can you hone in on a particular space and make sure you dominate there? I think that's the key.
Yeah, I would say PropTech is in an absolute great space for the next 10 years. It's because the real estate market is large, it's growing. I would say the barrier to entry into PropTech has been because some of the softwares used in PropTech are very concentrated. And so if you can't get yourself onto those key platforms, it's very difficult to get the scale that you really need to do really well here. Once you're on those platforms, your go-to-market is taken care of for a couple of years. And so it's tough to get there, but once you're there, it's really fruitful.
I think for us, in case of construction, I mean, domain knowledge is a big barrier, but also understanding the customer. If your customer is a architecture engineering firm or a construction firm, they have a very specific way that they like to do things. So understanding them, I think, not understanding them helps a lot of good technologies come almost the door of the customer, but then the selling point becomes very difficult. So for us, that was a lot more smooth because we tried to first solve the last sales problem, then go build the product. Yeah, and that user experience part is always and then pricing too, pricing, packaging, stuff like that, because people are more old school. But it's not their problem, it's your problem. You have to adapt, build something that works for them, right?
my personal observation has been that when you want to scale something and disrupt it with technology, it's easiest to do that in a large B2C market. And you take something that was done the old way, and then you bring in technology and make it easier. I think the thing about PropTech, which is directly related to the real estate industry, is that traditionally you don't have, the average consumer deciding, I'm gonna go and buy real estate. You go and buy candy, you go and buy food, so anything that is kind of sellable like that at scale. But real estate is something that now, PropTech is enabling access for the average consumer. And it means that, and what the disruption is being caused by, almost always is about, bridging that information asymmetry. So it's about being able to get the kind of information that realtors or real estate investors, traditional investors would have access to, and now is being given. So how do you source that information? How do you make that available? And then package it in a way that is consumable for the average consumer to take. So I think that disruption we're beginning to observe now, with Austin experiencing something like more than 100 persons on daily on average new 100 people are coming into Austin. Obviously the demand is going up. If the prices of the real estate market are going up, well, that's opportunity for investors. That means, this is a bullish market. That means you should. So I think that the time is just right for PropTech in Austin, and we're very, as an accelerator, we're definitely on the lookout for new and exciting technology and disruptors.
I personally think there's a lot more to be done over here from a digitization. I closed on 2 properties in the last 3 years, and one was just last month versus the one before was 3 years ago. I haven't seen much of a change as a consumer coming in to close on a property. The digitization was literally nothing, except for a couple of people using DocuSign to sign properties. When I came into the title office, I had to sign literally 150 pages from what I remember last, and I'm like, that's ridiculous. We should be able to have, everything else gets digitized. Why can't this piece of, this particular act also not get? And I think there's a lot more to be done, and I of course look to the innovators to come up with more ideas on how you can make it. And back to your point, was it, or somebody who said EV charges and it's far apart, but I would argue the other way. Why wouldn't you use construction area is one where it uses a lot of the materials that need to be processed, the charging that could probably transform this carbon footprint of all the machinery that's involved in building, right? Think about the carbon footprint that could be saved. So that's possibly an option to look at too. But I want to open it up to, yes?
Okay, I'd like to address it
Yeah.
from an economist point of view. As I've mentioned earlier, I've lived here for 38 years. And despite all the talk about technology, this community has always been driven by real estate development. That's where the money is. I don't think there is a developer that has gone out of business in the last 30 years, maybe with the exception of the early 80s when we were into a recession. You could throw a dart on the map and be a millionaire with the right type of investment in Austin, and that's in real estate. We've been the fastest growing tech city in the country for the last 40 years. By government statistics and what Elon Musk says and what I say, we're going to be the fastest growing city in the US for the next 50 years. We're averaging about 80,000 people moving to Austin. In a normal year, we're creating 50,000 plus jobs. So PropTech is in the right city, in the right environment, because this is where there's going to be a ton more real estate development. The unfortunate thing is a lot of developers are small family kind of businesses. They don't understand the high tech. They still work with spreadsheets. But more and more are changing. I see that happening. I'm an investor in a title company, and you think about why would I have to go and close at the office and not through DocuSign? Apparently it's illegal in Texas to close on a property through electronic documents. It's not yet widely accepted, and while a few firms do it, They may have some legal challenges if they're not present at the signing. So hopefully the sector will evolve, but if you're in the right sector, PropTech is going to do well in Austin for the next 50 years.
That's great to hear. Any questions from the audience to the panelists?
You mentioned that the barrier to PropTech has been because of the number of platforms that you can build on are limited. Can you speak to that specifically? What platforms are you?
Yeah, sure. So if you take property management firms, for example, the accounting softwares that they use, about 5 of them comprise of 80% of all multifamily managed properties in the US. And so it's your Yardi, MRI, Appfolio, Resman, and Intrada. And that's what everyone uses. And the new entrants in that space are find it very difficult to compete because these platforms have been built since the 80s, and so are very robust accounting platforms. However, they're not very robust in the API and tech-friendly kind of fashion that other industries have broken into. So that's the concentration.
Would you know about how cognitive sciences, data sciences are being used from the property realty management companies in terms of trying to get intel on any of you for that matter, right? How are they sourcing this information? How are they utilizing this information with the algorithms that's available in the market, or generating themselves? Any sense on that?
Yeah, I mean, we actually a company that we know of that actually does a lot of it using web scraping just to acquire the data.
Yeah.
That's their primary data acquisition model. But what they do is provide comparative studies and comparative models to folks who want to price their apartments. So property managers can price the apartments the right number.
Yeah.
But it's very similar to looking at what the neighbor's doing, what are people in your area doing. But the way they source mostly is about web scraping, and then they have some machine learning on top of that provides the right kind of matches and things like that. But even we're going through a cycle now too, where we have a lack of data in some aspects, and web scraping has definitely helped a lot for us from the perspective of kind of augmenting the data.
And in terms of where you're doing the web scraping, is it region specific to the Texas area? You're looking at it countrywide?
Well, we are available in 46 states, so we scrape all over the place.
Okay.
The good news is, when we started looking at it, we thought, hey, is this legal? Is there going to be some ramification? But recently there were lawsuits around this topic, which came up with the outcome was that it is okay to do it, and they can't really stop you unless you're doing something really malicious with the data. As long as it's public data, you can't really sue anybody for web scraping. So.
Sure. Any inputs on that? Where do you get your data from, Sean?
So our customers are mission critical infrastructure, telecom, fiber, this data is not available outside, and it's critical infrastructure. Nobody's allowed to have access to it. So everybody has a big data room. We usually access customers' data room. We scrape everything, validate what's accurate, what's not accurate, things like that. So it's almost not available anywhere for us. So.
Makes sense. And from International Accelerator perspective, where do you source your data for just how do you grow your business?
Oh, you mean as the accelerator?
Yeah.
So many variety of sources. I think right now, given the startup fever, it's not very difficult to get that because there's so many different types, such as Startup Founder World and et cetera, that are aggregating this data for us and giving it. But I was thinking in the kind of the PropTech sector, coming back to again, making things available for, and you talked about how you have to sign certain documents, and Angela described about government. I think a lot of the data is sitting in public databases, public meaning government-owned databases, that they're publishing from time to time that they need to digitize. And I think now the time is now coming up for governments to realize, and especially coming down to city governments at the county level, municipalities understanding for things like, for example, tax liens and et cetera, where they need to compete with outsources funding in order to be able to kind of support their kind of budgets and et cetera. I think that's where a big change is going to happen very soon. That movement is now happening, sort of democratizing that access to that information, so that not just a few vested parties have access to that information beforehand, but being able to publish and put it into something that is accessible to everybody. Like you said, having that API framework and be able to access that information. I think that's what's going to happen very, very soon. And then you'll just see an explosion of various kinds of PropTech services for, especially again in the B2C, which I'm very, very bullish on.
Anita,
Great, yeah.
How we source, we have at least 30 country advisors around the world, people in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. They refer startups to us. They get paid 1% equity just for that referral if they make it into our program. If you referred just by email one startup for 2 of our more successful ones, that would be $2 million today. A $50,000 investment would be about $2 million today on those startups. And then we have relationships with many, many international accelerators, including the country of India, where we are their exclusive partner in the US. So we have 10 portfolio companies from India because of that. They promote our program. But we have Startup Mexico, Startup Chile, Startup Portugal, Elevate Greece, many, many platforms that work with us to bring some of their graduates or current companies to Austin, because the US is the largest market, let's face
Sure.
it, and the easiest one to raise capital.
Capital, yeah.
I would invest in a startup. We've had some property, PropTech applications, but they were not unique in any ways. Where I see uniqueness, and there's a couple of companies that have done that, but none of them has become of national scale. Work with the city of Austin through an API to get all the properties through their GIS, and offer a platform where any investor from anywhere in the world can actually take a look at a property or possibly raw land and be able to compare it with land around them, valuations and appraisals and so forth and so on, and be guaranteed that that property is going to be validated and as a guarantee from the city of Austin that will have a zoning required to build a hotel or to build a residential development or an office building. And there is a whole lot of demand. Investments in real estate markets are unfortunately too local, maybe regional, and they need to be internationalized. If I'm sitting in India and I want to buy a piece of land in Austin, I should be able to buy it and be guaranteed not to have to send people to the city of Austin to find out.
And do it in a transparent way, basically. It's
Transparent
available
way.
online.
Well,
yeah.
first of all, you will need to have consultants to go to the city, and it's
Got it.
not an easy process to get anything permitted.
Okay, I'm conscious of the time
Okay,
here, so
sorry.
I'm just going to wrap up. Sorry, no, but that's a good, very good, valid point. You guys have reached a point, and I'm talking about the startups right now, where you are feeling successful, and at least at the point where you are. What would your advice be to people who have ideas, haven't made it to this point? How would you encourage them to do more and to actually come up with ideas in property tech? What would your last 10 seconds for each of you?
I mean, my own, I don't know if I'm, like I said, I'm far enough to give advice, but I would say just focus on a problem that's small enough to begin with. Don't try to conquer the world. And once you see that small problem being solved, then you start to see that adjacent problems get solved. So I would just say focus on a small thing to begin with and just do it really well.
I would say read books and talk to people. Keep it simple.
Just books?
Just books.
Okay.
If you're interested in property tech, read real estate books, know how to end-to-end invest in the market, look at how to value a property, buy some properties, get your feet wet a little bit, and talk to people. The more people you talk to, you're for sure gonna learn about property tech, and you're gonna learn about other startups kind of doing something that you're passionate about.
Sure, thank you. Sean?
I mean, focus on building a real business. I think there's a lot of hype in startups that this idea is going to be big and stuff, but to get some early customers, give them the value they need, and just focus on that. Back to the focus part. And I think it's easy to succeed if you focus on customers.
as a mentor from?
I want to echo John's advice. Focus on building a business model. Don't worry about the product. If the model is right, the product's going to come through. So.
All right, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.